I begged for a seat. I paid for every single cent of my daughter's wedding. The $10,000 dress, the luxurious party. But when I asked where I'd sit, she looked at me with shame and said, "Mom, you're not on the list." I was kicked out of the wedding I paid for. I felt betrayed, humiliated. But I had a secret tucked away, a last card to play. During the toast, when the lights went down and that video started playing, her happy smile vanished instantly. What I revealed to all of them silenced every single rich guest in the room. But before we keep going, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. And hey, don't forget to drop a like and hit that subscribe button. It really helps out a lot. I begged for a seat. I really did. I paid for every single cent of my daughter Lydia's wedding. The $10,000 designer dress, the lavish reception at the Lakeside Manor, the custom invites. Everything. I'm Marianne, but to most of the world, and certainly to the Caldwells, I'm just Mary, the simple woman. I'm 54, a widow, and my life has been built on double shifts and budgeting dimes. My late husband left me nothing but a strong work ethic and the life insurance policy I'd secretly converted into Lydia's wedding fund. And now, 2 days before the most expensive party I'd ever thrown, I found myself standing in the ornate ballroom, feeling like a ghost, an ATM with a pulse. The Lakeside Manor's ballroom was breathtaking, dripping with old-world opulence and the scent of money. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, reflecting the light off polished marble floors. Every corner, every detail, screamed of the prestige that Lydia was so desperately trying to grasp. Lydia, my daughter, my beautiful, successful Lydia, was getting married to Ryan Caldwell. Ryan is a kind boy, perhaps too kind for his ruthless family, but he comes from old money, which means this wedding was less about celebrating a union of hearts and more about cementing her place in that elite world. Lydia, at 28, had worked hard for her career, achieving financial success on her own, but she seemed to believe her humble origins were a liability, a stain she needed to scrub away completely before joining the Caldwell ranks. I had come to the manor just to check on the final floral arrangements, which were, I noted with a twinge of resentment, exactly the overly dramatic, rare orchids Lydia had insisted upon. Lydia and Ryan were huddled with a wedding planner, a stiff, perfectly coiffed woman named Ms. Hayes, whose face was a study in condescending neutrality, going over the seating chart. Ms. Hayes's clipboard seemed to hold the social hierarchy of the entire city. That's when I asked with my most unassuming, hopeful smile, "Where am I sitting?" Is the mother of the bride next to Mr. Caldwell at the main table? I wanted desperately to be seen as family, as a partner in this monumental event. Lydia slowly lifted her head. The movement was calculatedly slow, giving her time to compose a look of delicate frustration. She didn't look at me with love or even gratitude. She looked at me with something cold, something that felt like panic. The panic of a social climber caught mid-climb. She glanced first at Ms. Hayes, who gave a brief, dismissive sniff, then back to me. Her voice was low, tight, almost a whisper, as if the walls might report her shame to the Caldwell patriarch. "Mom," she started, the word feeling like a burden, an obligation she couldn't yet shed. "It's a small, exclusive event. Only essential, key people are at the dais. We simply don't have space for more. The Caldwell's list is already full. We put you at table 12. You'll be with some of Ryan's distant, elderly cousins. It's a very good table. Table 12. Distant, elderly cousins." I stood there, surrounded by towering floral arrangements I had paid for, under a chandelier I had funded, wearing the same modest dress I wore to my husband's funeral, and felt the public, silent blow land directly to my chest. Only essential, key people. That meant the woman who had spent 5 years of her life cleaning floors to pay for this spectacle was non-essential. I was not a key person. I was a budgetary footnote. I know how to hide pain. Years of being overlooked in grocery lines, ignored in factory break rooms, and dismissed by bureaucratic clerks taught me that skill. I swallowed the thick, burning lump in my throat, forced the smile back onto my face, and even managed a laugh, a brittle, high-pitched sound that made Ms. Hayes visibly wince. "Oh, silly me," I chirped, making myself the joke, diffusing the tension Lydia had created. "Of course. Too much fuss over a table. Don't worry about it, honey. I'll just check the cake setup and leave you to it. Table 12 it is." I walked away, my legs feeling like brittle straw, but my posture stiff and unbroken. I left the manor, drove home through the wealthy suburban streets, past manicured lawns and homes I could never afford, and the whole time, I didn't shed a tear. The pain wasn't hot and messy, it was cold, turning into something sharp and focused. It was then, sitting in my old sedan outside my modest house, that I decided I wouldn't go to the wedding. I had done my part. I was the wallet. My physical presence was clearly inconvenient, an embarrassment. But if they wanted me to be invisible, they would learn that an invisible mother could still leave a huge, undeniable mark. I walked into my little house, the silence amplifying my resolve. I went straight down to the dusty basement, and there it was, the heavy cardboard box marked, in my husband's fading script, Lydia's childhood. I set it on the washing machine and opened it. Inside were worn photo albums, stacks of old VCR tapes I hadn't looked at in years, and Lydia's faded, threadbare baby blanket. This box held the truth that Lydia desperately wanted to erase, the foundation she wanted to deny. I was about to use it as my final, most powerful invitation. I would send my story to the party. I pulled out a cheap composition notebook filled with my meticulous, tiny scribbles, the old budget sheets from when her father died, marking off expenses like electricity, heating, and doctor's visits. I was preparing my confession. The seed of my silent revenge had been planted the moment I was relegated to table 12, and it would bloom, undeniable and raw, for everyone to see. They say money can't buy happiness, but it certainly bought Lydia a lot of false friends and the opportunity to utterly forget where she came from. I sit here now, 2 days later, and the memories are flooding back. The real cost of that small, exclusive event wasn't the $500,000 I transferred. It was the 2 decades of life, dreams, and opportunities one gave up for her. I was widowed young, tragically. Lydia was 10. My husband and I were simple people, but proud. We worked hard side by side on the assembly line. When he died in a terrible machine accident, a preventable accident, I always believed. The insurance money was a lifeline, but also a constant, heavy reminder of my loss. I could have used it to retrain, to buy myself a future, or even to start a small business. Instead, I saw a flicker of ambition in Lydia's eyes, and I made a choice. Lydia needed private school to have a chance, she said. I poured every cent of that lump sum into her education, sacrificing my own future to secure hers. To maintain a small house and keep her dreams afloat, I took double shifts cleaning offices at night, sometimes pulling 18 hours straight between the factory floor and the sterile office buildings. I rarely slept more than 4 hours. The scorn wasn't new, you see. It started subtly after she got engaged to Ryan. The first time, it was over food. I remember trying to offer her something small, something truly me, something that represented my love, not my wallet. "I can bake your wedding cake, honey," I'd suggested brightly, wanting to contribute with my hands, not just my bank account. I've always been a good baker. It's the one small luxury I allowed myself. Lydia's reaction was instantaneous and horrifying. She looked at me with sheer panic, her face contorting as if I'd suggested serving spoiled. "Milk. Mom, please. It's a real wedding. We can't ruin the aesthetic. The Caldwells are flying in a pastry chef from New York. He's known for his architectural sugar work. Your baking is sweet, but it just won't fit the tone." The word aesthetic cut deeper than non-essential. I wasn't just poor, I was tacky. My simple, home-baked effort was a stain on her perfect, professional, Instagram-ready life. From then on, she actively filtered her life. She stopped inviting me to the new city apartment she and Ryan shared. When she was forced to introduce me to Ryan's business associates, she never referred to me as mom or my mother. It was always, meet Marianne, my biggest investor. An investor, not family. A transaction, not love. A means to an end. That's why the seating chart humiliation in Chapter 1 was the final straw. It confirmed that the problem wasn't logistics or lack of space. It was my simple clothes, my calloused, working hands, my very presence, which screamed of the working-class origins she was so determined to leave behind. I was the dirt she needed to hide under the thick Persian rug before the grand guests arrived. I spent the morning finalizing the transfer for the florist, the last big check. I hit send on the bank app. It felt ceremonial, like cutting the last thread of a tether. My financial obligation is now complete. I owe them nothing more. The phone rang instantly. It was Lydia. I didn't expect an apology. I expected exactly what I got, pure transactional anxiety. "Mom, did the wire transfer go through for the tulips? The florist is calling, and they won't even deliver the arrangements until the money clears." It's causing massive stress, and Ms. Hayes is furious. She sounded stressed, but not emotionally distressed, just worried about the logistics of the money I was supplying. It went through Lydia. Everything is paid. The full amount. Your flowers are safe. She sighed, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. Oh, thank God. You saved the day, Mom. See, you're the best. The highest compliment she could give me was about my solvency, not my character. Don't worry about my seat, Lydia, I said, my voice deliberately flat, stripped of all warmth. I was tired of being the best wallet. I've decided I won't be attending. There was stunned silence on the line, but it wasn't the silence of a heartbroken daughter. It was the frantic silence of a daughter whose perfectly constructed plan was suddenly jeopardized. What? Mom, you have to be here. What about the seating arrangement? It'll look awful if your seat is empty. People will talk. Mr. Caldwell will ask questions. Her focus was entirely on appearances. Well, I replied, a small, cold smile touching my lips. Since I wasn't important enough to invite to a key table, I'm certainly not important enough to attend. I've done my part, honey. Enjoy the flowers, the cake, and the guests that truly matter. I hung up before she could scramble for a pathetic excuse or a fake plea. My decision was final, but my final act was yet to come. I wasn't just staying home. I was preparing my weapon. My confession needed to be heard by everyone she wanted to impress. It needed to be on that screen. I knew the name of the man who could make my final invitation the loudest, most undeniable statement in the room. Victor. My husband's friend, the one person who knew the truth of my struggle. I didn't waste another minute. The cold, sharp pain of her rejection fueled me, giving me a focus and clarity I hadn't felt since the immediate shock of my husband's death. I needed a professional touch, a discreet professional touch, to translate my emotional pain into undeniable visual evidence. That's why I called Victor. Victor was an old friend of my late husband. They had served in the military together and stayed in touch. Victor ran a small, struggling multimedia production studio downtown, specializing in corporate videos. He owed me a few favors from way back, small acts of kindness I'd done when his business first started, and he was the one person I could trust not to breathe a word of this. He was loyal to the memory of my husband, and by extension, to me. When I met him later that day, I was carrying the heavy, cumbersome cardboard box. I didn't tell him about the seating chart directly. The humiliation was too raw to speak aloud. I framed it simply, staring him straight in the eye. Victor, I'm making a very personal video montage for Lydia. A toast, but a silent one. A truth. I need you to digitize every piece of footage and photo in this box and arrange them into a story that cannot be denied. He raised an eyebrow, looking skeptically at the worn, dusty box on his modern laminate desk. His studio was small, smelling faintly of old coffee and electrical equipment. A surprise for the bride? Mary, that's sweet, but usually those are done months in advance. And your material looks a little vintage. It's not just sweet, Victor. It's the most important thing I will ever produce. It's my legacy and her foundation. I need it by tomorrow night. Final, non-negotiable. I then opened the box and laid out the artifacts. The yellowed utility shutoff notices I'd managed to pay at the last minute. The crudely patched dress Lydia wore to her first school dance, which I had repaired with visible stitching because I couldn't afford new fabric. The photo of a $5 grocery store birthday cake with one candle, bought the year I took on my third cleaning job. As he started scanning the photos and digitizing the old VCR tapes, which hummed and sputtered on his equipment, I began writing the voiceover script, my true final toast to the bride and groom. I chose my words carefully. No anger. No yelling. No self-pity. The tone had to be one of dignified, weary truth. A statement of fact, a testament to enduring love, and a quiet, crushing shaming of profound ingratitude. It had to resonate with the conscience of every guest, rich or poor. The script started. You see this lavish ballroom? You see the expensive wine? The story behind this elegance is not told in bank bonds or inheritances. It is written in dust and calluses. It's written in the silent hours I worked when the world was asleep. I wanted the video to open with a shock that grounded the opulence in stark reality. I had taken a clean, high-resolution screenshot of the final wire transfer receipt for all the wedding services, the full $500,000. The video would start with that number on a black screen, silent and imposing, letting the guests absorb the sheer magnitude of the cost. Then, it would quickly transition to the raw, painful images of our past. I wanted the contrast to be a punch in the gut, a clear demonstration of the distance between the cost and the sacrifice. While Victor worked on the montage, meticulously synchronizing the old tapes with the scanned images, I went into the sound booth to record the voiceover. This was the hardest part. Reading the script, hearing my own voice recount the struggles. The nights I missed dinner to save money, the time I was too sick to get out of bed but had to work anyway, the desperate prayers. It felt like ripping open old, barely healed wounds. My voice broke twice, dissolving into silent tears. Victor gave me a comforting, knowing look through the glass, his expression confirming he understood the stakes. I reset, taking a deep, shuddering breath. Don't cry, Mary. This is a confession of truth, not a pity party. Your strength is your delivery. The most potent line, the one I knew would silence the entire room, was the crescendo I had built toward. I repeated it several times until I got the quiet, authoritative, undeniable delivery I needed. You wanted to erase your origins, my daughter. You hid me. But it was from that very pain, from that lonely, invisible struggle, that I lifted you up. Victor finished the final cut, blending the clean, high-end audio of my voice with the stark, grainy footage and the undeniable proof of payment. It was devastatingly effective. Mary, Victor said, handing me the flash drive in a sleek black presentation case. This isn't just a video. This is a monument to what a mother will do. But how do you get it on the big screen without being there? You know how tight security is at the manor. I smiled, a genuine, cold smile of satisfaction. You mentioned you know the AV guy at the manor, right? The one who controls the main projector for the toasts? Name your price. I need this played at precisely 9:30 p.m., during the moment of the main toast, when Mr. Caldwell will be at his most boastful. Victor gave a low whistle, clearly understanding the exquisite timing. He nodded slowly. Consider it done, Mary. You've certainly earned this moment of clarity. I left Victor's studio with the secret weapon in my purse. All I had to do now was wait for the clock to strike 9:30 p.m. tomorrow night. My invisible presence was guaranteed. The final hours before the wedding were a strange mix of high-voltage adrenaline and cold, paralyzing anxiety. My hands were shaking, not from fear of being caught, but from the sheer audacity, the social terrorism, of my plan. I was about to hijack a high-society wedding with a brutal, self-evident dose of reality. I kept running the plan through my head. Victor's contact, the timing, the content. One small mistake, and I would look like a bitter, failed mother. I spent the morning making sure I was completely unreachable. I turned off my phone, wrapped it tightly in a soft towel, and put it in a deep drawer in the kitchen. I needed absolute silence and isolation to prepare for the inevitable, deafening explosion. I knew the moment that video played, the Caldwell's world would implode, and I needed to be utterly shielded from the initial shrapnel. Around noon, my old landline phone, the only one the Caldwells had, rang. I almost didn't answer it, but a strong, immediate premonition told me to pick up. This was the final test. Marianne, is that you? It was a voice dripping with controlled, inherited authority. Mr. Caldwell, Ryan's father. The voice was smooth, polished, and utterly self-important. I instantly put on my most polite, slightly frail voice, managing to sound weak but regretful. Mr. Caldwell. Yes, I'm so terribly sorry to say. I'm afraid I'm quite unwell. A sudden, terrible flu, or perhaps the immense stress of the event. My doctor advised complete rest, confined to bed. There was a noticeable pause on his end, a moment of sharp, clinical calculation. The Caldwells are masters of maintaining appearances. For them, social standing is currency. My sudden illness was not a tragedy, but an inconvenience to their optics. I see. Well, that is most unfortunate, Marianne, he said, the lack of sympathy thinly veiled. You understand the optics, don't you? This is a very important union for Ryan, for the firm, and for the family name. People will be looking for the mother of the bride. We cannot have speculation. He sounded more worried about gossip than my health. I understand completely, Mr. Caldwell. Believe me, nothing would make me happier than to be there, fulfilling my duty, I replied, weaving the irony of the word duty into my tone. But I promise you, sir, my gift, my contribution, will certainly be present. It will arrive exactly on time. And I assure you, it will speak for itself in a way that is utterly unforgettable. I emphasized the word contribution with deliberate, hidden ambiguity, letting him assume $1 million check. He seemed mollified, taking my vague statement as a promise of another exorbitant financial gift that would smooth over my absence. Very well, Marianne. Focus on your recovery. And do ensure your contribution is delivered promptly to the manor. We appreciate your discretion." He hung up with a dismissive click, having completed his transaction. I hung up the landline, a strange, genuine laugh bubbling in my chest. He had no idea just how present my contribution was going to be, or how much it was going to cost him in terms of reputation. The afternoon dragged on with excruciating slowness. I paced my small living room. I started to worry about Victor's contact. What if the AV guy backed out at the last minute? What if the timing was wrong, and the video played during the first dance, missing the shock of the toast? What if the projector failed? I fought the doubt by focusing relentlessly on the image of Lydia's face when she had looked at me with that cold, social panic. That look solidified my resolve. I wasn't doing this for cruel revenge. I was doing this to save my dignity, which was the only thing Lydia hadn't managed to spend or degrade. Around 5 p.m., my heart leaped when I heard a faint ping from the drawer where my cell phone was confined. I snatched it out, turned it on just long enough to see the message. It was from Victor, a simple, perfect code. Delivered. 9:30 p.m. Main toast. Godspeed. The die was cast. My invisible missile was armed and in position. I knew the ceremony had already taken place. Lydia was officially Mrs. Caldwell. Now came the reception, the lavish $500,000 celebration I had purchased for a seat at table 12. I showered and put on my favorite blue silk dress. It wasn't a gown. It was a simple, elegant knee-length piece, the one item I owned that made me feel worthy. I styled my hair carefully, added a touch of lipstick. I wasn't going to the party, but I was dressing for my victory, for the moment of my truth. I needed to feel strong and composed. I didn't drive toward the manor. I drove to a quiet, hidden public park that overlooked the entire sprawling estate. I parked my old sedan, walked a short distance past some thick oak trees, and found a stone bench nestled perfectly in the twilight. From here, I had a clear, unobstructed view of the grand ballroom's windows, shimmering with the golden, oblivious light of the party I had funded but was forbidden to attend. I settled onto the cold bench, pulled my dress smooth, looked at the dazzling, distant window of the party, and waited for the show to begin. The clock was ticking irrevocably towards 9:30 p.m. The night air was cool, carrying faint, distorted echoes of music, laughter, and the clinking of expensive crystal from the manor down the hill. I sat on that stone bench, feeling like a sentry guarding a fortress I was banned from entering. The glow from the ballroom windows was almost painful to look at, a beautiful, golden lie illuminating a world of artifice and social pretense. Every tick of the park's old clock tower was a hammer blow to my chest, driving my nervousness deeper into my bones. I imagined Lydia inside, radiant in the Italian silk I paid for, surrounded by people who judged her background and whom she was now desperately trying to impress. I imagined Mr. Caldwell, the image of patrician smugness, shaking hands, talking about corporate mergers and the future of the companies, completely unaware that his son's wedding, his ultimate show of status, was about to become the site of a very public, very painful reckoning. I had dressed with such purpose, but sitting there alone, with the sounds of the party drifting up to me, the fear started to creep in again, cold and insidious. Was I cruel? Was this the act of a bitter, desperate woman? My mother's heart, that part of me that had only ever known how to sacrifice, ached, telling me to stop, to call Victor and tell him to abort the mission, to simply drive home and let the humiliation fade. Don't do this, Mary. Don't tear down the stage you built for your daughter. Don't humiliate her in front of the world she fought for. But then I remembered the seating chart. I remembered that look of shame when she said I wasn't important enough. I thought about the decades of grinding labor, the bills I chose to pay instead of buying new tires, or taking a much-needed vacation, or replacing my rattling, ancient refrigerator. I didn't want a seat at the main table. I wanted recognition for the life I sacrificed to put her at that table. I wasn't attacking her happiness. I was demanding my dignity, which she had tried to steal. My action was an insistence on my human value. I pulled out my phone again, briefly, just to confirm the message one last time. 9:30 p.m. Main toast. It was 9:20 p.m. 10 minutes left until the moment of truth. A feeling of absolute finality settled over me, like the closing of a tomb door. There was no calling Victor back. There was no going back now. My presence was needed, not physically inside the room, but in the uncompromising truth that was about to be broadcast. I tried to focus on the sounds of the park, the rustling leaves, the distant traffic on the highway. Anything but the bright, oblivious party below. I found myself reciting my favorite hymn, something my own mother used to sing to me. A comfort and a reminder of simple, unshakable faith, trying to ground myself in something pure. 9:28 p.m. My imagination, sharpened by my focus, vividly pictured the action inside. The sudden quieting of the orchestra, the clinking of glasses for silence, the waiters freezing mid-step. I could see the father of the groom, Mr. Caldwell, standing up, adjusting his silk tie, perhaps tapping his glass with a silver fork. I imagined him clearing his throat, ready to give his measured, boastful speech about family fortunes merging and the auspicious future of the Caldwell name. His pride would be at its most vulnerable, its most inflated. 9:29 p.m. My breath hitched violently. My entire body tensed, feeling a sudden, cold wave of nausea. This was the moment of no return. I closed my eyes and whispered into the cool night air. "This is my toast, Lydia. Hear it, and may it be the last lie you ever tell." 9:30 p.m. The music didn't just stop. It was violently cut off. I opened my eyes, staring intently at the ballroom windows. The laughter and conversation suddenly died out. The golden, ambient light inside the ballroom didn't just dim. It vanished entirely. The whole front of the manor, the entire room, plunged into pitch blackness. A collective gasp, muffled but distinctly audible even from my distance, floated up the hill, followed by sharp whispers of confusion. They thought the power was out. Then, from the direction of the main ballroom, an intense, brilliant, white spotlight suddenly cut through the dark, shining directly onto the massive projector screen positioned near the head table. My stomach flipped violently as the first image appeared, stark, isolated, and uncompromising on the screen. A close-up of a bank transfer slip showing the $500,000 wire transfer. The words "wedding services total, paid in full" flashed across the top. The truth was out, silent and imposing. The darkness in the ballroom was absolute, dramatic, and broken only by the glaring, incriminating light of the projector screen. I could hear the faint, confused murmurings of the rich guests from my perch on the hill. They thought it was a technical glitch, or perhaps a ridiculously dramatic lighting cue for Mr. Caldwell's toast. They had no idea the nature of the show that was about to begin. The image on the screen, the large, undeniable number of the payment, $500,000, hung there for 5 agonizing seconds. A full $500,000, the cold, hard number the mother of the bride paid for her exclusion. Then my voice began. It wasn't the voice of an angry, vengeful woman. It was the soft, tired, yet utterly resolute voice of a mother delivering a final lesson. It resonated through the high-end sound system I had unwittingly paid for, and it cut through the murmurs instantly, commanding silence. "This is the amount that secured your party, Lydia. My gift. The cost of the dress, the flowers, the food, the location. But this is only the final tally." The screen immediately transitioned, the stark black and white image of the bank receipt replaced by a grainy, color-faded, old photograph. Lydia, aged about 12, standing stubbornly on the curb in the biting snow. She wasn't wearing an expensive coat, or even one that fit. She was wearing an old, crudely patched-up jacket of mine that had seen better days and had a visible patch near the elbow. "This," my voice continued, steady, almost conversational, the calm tone making the words even more chilling, "is the real cost. The cost of keeping you warm when I couldn't afford a new coat for myself. The cost of choosing your education, your dignity, your future, over my comfort and financial safety." I focused my gaze on the area where the head table was positioned. Even from this distance, I could see the silhouette of Lydia's head snap up, her perfect posture instantly breaking. I could sense her immediate, total panic, the realization of what was happening. Ryan was shifting wildly next to her, his composure dissolving. Mr. Caldwell's imposing figure, which had been rigid with confusion, quickly morphed into suspicion and then visibly into cold, dangerous fury. He was leaning in, demanding answers. The montage accelerated, flashing images from the physical archive of my sacrifice. A close-up of my hands, calloused, veined, and stained with strong cleaning fluid from my night shifts, starkly juxtaposed with a photo of a tiny, crude, store-bought birthday cake with a single candle. A birthday where I'd worked late and had to rush home to bake something minimal because I'd spent the last of my money on her field trip. "I am told tonight that this is an exclusive event," my voice echoed, the irony biting hard, stinging the assembled elite. "That only important, essential people are here. I wanted to come. I wanted to sit proudly at the table you gave me. But you saw me as a liability. You saw my simple clothes and my tired hands, and you wanted to erase the woman who bought that very table for you. The murmurs in the hall were gone, utterly crushed by the weight of the confession. The silence was absolute, a powerful vacuum of shocked realization. Everyone, the rich friends, the business associates, the Caldwells, the wedding party, was captive to the screen. They were witnessing a daughter's profound betrayal and a mother's quiet, final reckoning. I saw Mr. Caldwell lean forward violently, his mouth moving in an angry snarl, clearly demanding an explanation from Ryan, but Ryan couldn't answer. He was paralyzed, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. The climax of the video arrived. The screen showed a final, heartbreaking sequence. The utility shut off notices, the bank app showing my depleted savings, and finally me, sitting alone in our old, sparsely decorated kitchen, studying bills, looking utterly exhausted and defeated but determined. Then the voice hit its peak, thick with raw emotion but not breaking. You wanted to erase your origins, my daughter. You hid me from your world, you treated me as disposable. But it was from that pain, from that lonely, silent struggle, from my uninvited, unessential hands, that I lifted you up to stand where you stand today. You are a Caldwell by marriage, but you are Mary's daughter by sacrifice. A powerful, visible wave of sound washed over the park. Not the polite applause of a party, but the sounds of collective gasps, sharp intakes of breath, and genuine, open weeping from the guests. The pride of the Caldwells, the carefully constructed sophistication of the room, had been shattered by the raw, undeniable, documented truth of my sacrifice. Lydia, the elegant, calculating bride, was utterly exposed as a heartless hypocrite. The screen went black, leaving only a single, white sentence visible in the darkness. The silence that followed was the heaviest, most meaningful sound I had ever heard. The party was over, though they didn't know it yet. The single white sentence hung on the black screen, an undeniable judgment. Love does not require an invitation. Only respect. The projection light clicked off, plunging the screen back into darkness. The manor's ambient golden light flickered back on. Not gently, but abruptly, shattering the theatrical moment and replacing darkness and truth with a harsh, revealing light. The scene inside, which I couldn't fully see, must have been a frozen tableau of collective embarrassment and chaos. My voice had done its work. It had delivered the speech I was forbidden to give, the truth I was forced to hide, amplified by the very wealth they valued. It wasn't a malicious attack. It was an insistence on being seen, a demand for the respect Lydia had denied me. I imagined the hundreds of rich guests turning their eyes away from Lydia and Ryan, not because she was poor, but because she had betrayed the person who loved her most and paid for their presence. I imagined the immediate, crushing shame she must be feeling, a shame far worse than the mild embarrassment she tried to inflict on me. She wasn't embarrassed by my poverty anymore. She was humiliated by her own profound lack of character in front of the elite circle she had bankrupted me to join. The first physical confirmation of the wreckage came from a familiar figure staggering out the front entrance of the manor, his face a mask of purple, absolute fury. Mr. Caldwell. His silk tuxedo was perfect, but his composure was utterly destroyed. He grabbed a young man, a valet or perhaps a security guard, and was clearly barking orders, gesturing wildly toward the front doors. The dignity of the Caldwell name had just been comprehensively trashed by a 5-minute video, and he was livid. He looked like he wanted to sue the air itself. Moments later, my phone, which I had retrieved from my purse, flashed with a torrent of missed calls and urgent texts, mostly from Ryan. Then a single, all-caps text from Lydia arrived, confirming the depth of her self-pity and fury. How could you? You destroyed my life. I hate you for this. I read the text. The only thing she could focus on was her ruined life, her ruined event. I slowly typed a reply, then paused, considering the futility of words, and deleted it. There was no need for words anymore. The video was my final statement, and the current chaos was its echo. The party music sputtered back on, a desperate, upbeat jazz number, but it sounded hollow, thin, and hysterical. It was the frantic sound of people trying to pretend the last 5 minutes never happened, a futile attempt to resurrect a facade that had just been vaporized into the night air. Suddenly, I saw significant movement near the side entrance of the manor, a figure in a long white gown. It was Lydia. She was running, not walking, her expensive train dragging heavily on the gravel driveway, gathering dirt and debris. She was crying, but it wasn't the soft, sorrowful cry of a remorseful daughter. It was a loud, desperate wail of shame and wounded pride. She was running away from the audience, away from the expectations, away from the devastating lie she had built her life upon. I stood up from the bench, adjusting the pleats of my simple blue silk dress. I felt a profound, almost terrifying sense of calm and clarity. I had spoken my piece, secured my dignity, and now, the confrontation I had engineered was coming directly to me. I walked slowly towards the edge of the park overlooking the driveway, watching as Lydia, the beautiful, expensive bride, stumbled, nearly falling, and then sank onto the cold stone curb near a hedge, burying her head in her hands. The image was desolate, a symbol of luxury defeated by reality. I had anticipated this exact reaction. She wouldn't call a taxi or a friend. She would instinctively come looking for the one person who could explain why her world had just been publicly ostracized. She wouldn't be looking to ask for forgiveness. She would be looking to demand an explanation for my unbelievable cruelty. I watched her for a moment, the shimmering silhouette of the manor behind her, the pathetic noise of the ruined party a low thrum. I waited for her to notice me, for the predator's instinct to lock onto its target. And then she looked up, her face tear-streaked and horrified, and she saw me, her uninvited, unessential mother, standing calmly in the twilight, composed and dignified. The moment Lydia saw me, standing like a silent, dignified sentinel against the darkness of the park, she scrambled up from the curb. Her white gown, the one I had paid for, was hopelessly stained with dirt and gravel, a perfect visual metaphor for the mess her perfect life was now in. "Mom!" she shrieked, her voice hoarse, raw, and full of accusation. "What in God's name did you do? You destroyed everything. You humiliated me in front of them, the Caldwells, Ryan's business partners. How could you be so wicked?" Her choice of words was a fresh, cold slap. It confirmed everything I already knew. Her biggest concern wasn't my feelings, her actions, or even the betrayal of my trust. It was the judgment of them, the Caldwells and their associates. She cared only about the external audience. Before she could launch into a full, self-serving tirade, my cell phone started vibrating furiously in my hand. It was Ryan, clearly in a state of high alarm. I swiped the call open and held the phone to my ear, ensuring my gaze remained fixed on Lydia, letting her hear the consequences in real time. "Mary, you have to stop this. You've ruined the night." I can hear his voice. He's demanding to know how you pulled this off. Tell me it was a mistake. Tell me it was just a bad joke, a rehearsal tape. Anything. Ryan's voice was high-pitched, dissolving into near hysterics, the sound of privilege realizing its lack of control. I held the phone slightly away from my ear, letting Lydia hear the pure, unadulterated desperation of her new husband. "Ryan," I said calmly, cutting through his panic with the clarity of a sharp blade, "I didn't ruin the night. I revealed a truth. You and Lydia tried to hide the very foundation of your success. You were ashamed of the work and the sacrifice that paid for your elegance. And anything built on dishonesty, Ryan, is never solid. Your reputation is built on air. I don't care about honesty. I care about my family's reputation. My father is going to ruin me. You have no idea what you've unleashed," he screamed, sounding utterly terrified of Mr. Caldwell's wrath. "Oh, I have a perfect idea of what I've unleashed," I countered, my voice low and steady. "It's called the truth. And if you are worried about reputations, Ryan, then talk to your father about who paid for the party he is so desperately trying to save. I'm done talking." I hung up abruptly and placed the phone back in my purse, never breaking eye contact with Lydia. She was trembling, staring at me as if I were a stranger, a villain from a cheap movie. "You called me cruel. You called me hateful," she spat, pointing a shaky, accusing finger at me. "No, Lydia. I called me your mother." I corrected gently, the correction far more devastating than any yell. "Cruelty was what you did on Wednesday afternoon, telling me I wasn't important enough to sit at the table I purchased for you. Cruelty was introducing me as an investor instead of a mother. That was the act that started this. This," I gestured toward the distant, shattered party, "is simply the reaction." I saw the distinct flicker of realization in her eyes, the sudden, terrifying understanding that this wasn't an act of petty revenge, but a measured, profound response to an absolute violation of trust and love. She finally saw the cause and effect. Inside the manor, the sporadic, panicked conversations were now loud enough to hear. I knew the damage was irreparable. The story was already spreading, amplified by the dozens of guests recording the fallout on their phones. I took a deep, cool breath, savoring the cool, clean air of the park. My chest felt lighter than it had in years. The shame I was supposed to carry had been lifted and placed squarely where it belonged. Lydia took a staggering step toward me, perhaps to argue, perhaps to plead, but I beat her to it. I didn't want a shouting match or a tearful, insincere apology. I wanted an exit with undeniable dignity. "I'm leaving now, Lydia," I said, my voice quiet but absolute. "You wanted me out of your life, you wanted me invisible, and now you have your wish. I have settled my debt to you, and I have nothing left to give. But I gave you the one thing you couldn't buy tonight, the truth about yourself." I turned my back on her, the brilliant, expensive white of her gown stark and forlorn against the dark trees. I could hear her frantic cry behind me, less of an accusation now and more of a terrified plea. "Mom, wait! Where are you going? Don't leave me here." I kept walking, not toward the ruined party at the manor, but toward my car, leaving my daughter exactly where she had left me, alone with the profound, devastating consequences of her choices. I didn't look back. Walking away from Lydia, hearing her desperate, choked sobs dissolve into the cold night air behind me, was, without question, the hardest thing I had ever done as her mother. It felt like tearing off a limb, a brutal act of self-preservation, but it was absolutely necessary for survival. I needed to establish the hard, final boundary she had so ruthlessly violated. When I reached my car, I unlocked it but didn't get inside. I decided to wait a little longer. I owed myself the peace of witnessing the conclusion of the fallout, the final disposition of the emotional wreckage. I sat on a low wall near the edge of the parking lot, pulling my composure around me like a warm, protective shawl. It didn't take long for the next act to begin. A sleek black Mercedes, driven by a thoroughly frantic Ryan, screeched to a halt next to Lydia. He jumped out, his face a mask of pale fury and fear, and grabbed her arm roughly. I watched them argue near the open trunk of the car. It was clear this wasn't a lover's quarrel or a discussion of wounded feelings. It was a furious, terrified business discussion about disaster control. He was demanding that she pull herself together and face the remaining guests, or worse, face the unholy, corporate wrath of his father. Lydia shook him off violently, pointing up the hill, no doubt indicating that I, the source of the disaster, was lurking somewhere in the darkness. Ryan looked wildly in my direction, but I was hidden deep in the shadow of the trees. He then got back into the car, slamming the door, and drove off quickly, leaving Lydia standing alone on the curb, the epitome of abandoned, expensive luxury. She was officially expelled from the perfect Caldwell world. She slowly walked back to the stone bench where I had waited, sinking onto it, her head bowed in utter despair. I walked out of the deep shadows and approached her. She looked up, her eyes puffy, bloodshot, and completely devoid of their usual polished ambition. "You came back to gloat," she accused, her voice barely a weak, wounded whisper. "To watch me suffer." "No, Lydia. I came back to confirm that I won't be coming back again," I said, sitting beside her on the bench, deliberately leaving a cold, noticeable gap between us, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance she had created. "You need to understand exactly what you did. You didn't just hurt my feelings. You didn't just embarrass me. You weaponized my sacrifice against me." I spoke gently, without shouting, without any trace of anger, which seemed to disarm her more completely than any yell could have. My quiet voice forced her to listen to the substance of the betrayal. "I spent my entire adult life giving you every opportunity. I paid for the prestigious education, the apartment, the clothes, the entire foundation of the life you now proudly call important. And your response, when I asked for a simple seat next to you, was to categorize me as disposable. You tried to make me invisible to save your pride in front of the Caldwells. That, Lydia, is a betrayal of a mother's sacred trust, a violation I cannot, and will not, forgive with a check or a simple hug." She finally found her voice, not in an apology, but in a defensive, frantic justification. "It was for my future, Mom. I had to fit in. You don't understand that world, that pressure." "I understand that world perfectly now," I countered, looking at the distant, glittering manor. "It's a world that values money over integrity and appearances over humanity. And I just proved on your wedding night that integrity and moral truth are a much more powerful, more enduring currency than any check the Caldwells can write." I stood up again, concluding the conversation. "You told me, Lydia, that love doesn't need a seat at the table. And you were right. Love doesn't. But love requires respect. You lost my respect when you chose to erase my existence. The video was my final invitation to you, Lydia. an invitation to see the truth of your own heart. I looked down at the large, visible stain on her wedding dress, the dirt clinging to the hem. You have your new life, your rich husband, your luxury. But I have my dignity. I have my self-respect. And I choose dignity every time. I turned my back for the final time. This time, she didn't call out a desperate plea. I walked steadily to my car, got in, and drove away, leaving her sitting alone beneath the lingering, empty glow of the distant, ruined celebration. I drove home, not to weep over the loss of a daughter, but to prepare for a whole new life. I had won back the only thing that truly mattered, the only thing they couldn't shame me out of, myself, Marianne. The ensuing weeks were a whirlwind of quiet, yet intense consequence. My video, recorded surreptitiously by a dozen guests who couldn't believe their eyes, went viral instantly. It was dubbed the uninvited mother's toast, and became an international lightning rod for commentary on social climbing, family values, and the moral bankruptcy of inherited wealth. I was hailed by strangers online as a quiet hero, a martyr who finally fought back with devastating elegance. I ignored the media circus entirely, refusing all interview requests. I had spoken my piece, delivered my truth, and I was done with the drama. The most significant and most ironic consequence came not from Lydia, but from the source of all her ambition, Mr. Caldwell. 2 weeks after the disaster, a sealed, imposing envelope arrived at my old address. It contained a cold, formal letter from Caldwell and Sons Legal. It wasn't an apology, or even a threat of a lawsuit, which I had half expected. It was a transaction. Mr. Caldwell, desperate to quash the bad press, stop the viral comments, and protect the Caldwell brand from any further association with such an embarrassing scandal, had wired the full $500,000, the entire cost of the wedding, back into my bank account. His cold, impersonal way of saying, "You were right, your cost was too high, and we'll pay you to disappear and never mention this again." The money itself wasn't the point. I had already mentally written it off as the cost of my dignity. But receiving it back was a tangible, undeniable confirmation that my moral stand had forced a financial correction from a man who valued money above all else. I had won the war for my respect, and now, miraculously, I had my entire retirement fund back, plus the clarity of a clean slate. I used the money to make a quiet, clean, definitive break from my old life. I sold my old house, the one filled with memories of double shifts, budgeting, and now, the final, painful confrontation. With the proceeds and the Caldwell refund, I bought a small, charming cottage on the coast, miles away from the city, and the suffocating high society Lydia was so desperate to join. The new house was modest, but it overlooked the wild, cleansing ocean. I bought the car I'd always wanted, a comfortable, reliable vehicle, not a luxury status symbol. I finally, unequivocally, began my long-overdue retirement. I didn't expect to hear from Lydia again, and for several weeks I didn't. The silence was deep, final, and healing. Then, one day, an overseas letter arrived, postmarked from London. The letter was brief, typed, and utterly devoid of warmth or remorse. It contained no apologies, only notification. Lydia and Ryan had moved abroad to start fresh, away from the inescapable American gossip and the toxic shadow of the viral video. She wrote that she hoped I found happiness, but bitterly implied that my cruel, selfish actions had forced them to uproot their lives. There was no return address, no phone number, just a definitive, final closing of the door, a last bitter act of blame. I read the letter, and surprisingly, I smiled. I didn't need a tearful reconciliation or a Hollywood ending where my daughter begged for forgiveness at my doorstep. My true, conclusive ending was this. I didn't need her to be happy, or even present, for me to be happy. I had re-earned my peace, my financial freedom, and my self-worth. I sat on the porch of my new, sun-drenched cottage, looking out at the endless, powerful ocean, sipping my morning coffee. I was alone, yes, but I was not lonely. I was finally, truly free, free from obligation, free from expectation, and free from the shame I was supposed to carry. The sun was warm, the air was fresh, and I had no debts, financial or emotional. I look at the world now, and I see Lydia and Ryan living their wealthy life abroad, constantly trying to escape the shadow of that 5-minute video, forever looking over their shoulders. They have the luxury, the prestige, and the title. But I, Marianne, just Mary, have the dignity. My story is not just a tale of revenge, but a necessary warning. I tell it now as a confession, not of guilt, but of pride. You must always respect your origins. Because sometimes the humblest mother, the one relegated to table 12, holds the final, most powerful, and most unforgettable word.